Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So, do we have any audience? Other than Dave on the phone. So, no comments from the audience? How about corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar? Nothing. I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Dr. Peterson, how would you like to vote on adopting the consent calendar?
I'll vote yes.
Motion passes unanimous.
Okay. That brings us to item 6A, aeration blower system emergency power and secondary clarifiers. Number 1 and 2, rehabilitation project.
Good afternoon. Brent is out there with a cold today, so I'm stepping in for him to present to you a request for authorizing the task order that will allow us to provide engineering services during construction of the aeration system blower generator and secondary clarifiers 1 and 2 projects. This will be an extension of our existing contract with Corolla Engineers, who has prepared the design for both of those projects, secondary clarifiers and the blower generator. And they're currently under contract with us on secondary clarifier number 3, providing the engineering services for that contract. So this is kind of the last piece in that puzzle for us to move forward with the remaining clarifiers and the blower generator. I think you guys are aware that we awarded the construction project associated with this work to Vindicator Construction at the last board meeting, and they are ready to get going. So the kinds of work that will be provided by Corolla during the course of construction include responding to requests for information from the contractor regarding technical design details. They'll be working with us to review a select list of technical submittals. We try to save money for the district by splitting that task, taking on as many of the submittal reviews in-house as possible that we feel comfortable with. But sometimes, they've got specialists that are helping us out. We want those eyes on the submittals. And so they've developed a very thorough list of all the submittals that they intend to review for us as part of this work. And then they'll also participate in select construction meetings, generally be available to answer questions, and help support the district if we have any changes in scope and need to direct the contractor to perform additional work. So, the total requested amount to provide these services during this really a 3-year project that's starting now and will take us through the fall of 2023. And the total amount they're asking for is $258,758. Any questions?
Any questions?
No real questions, just, is it typical for us to award to a contractor, somebody to actually do the work and then subsequently come back with engineering, capacity enhancements to the district?
Yeah.
Is it not typical to bring them together?
To bring the same engineer
Or just,
back?
at least when the project comes forward, it's something that potentially could be anticipated as part of that package, I guess.
Yeah, so I see what you're asking. You know, when I first started at the district, the first couple projects I worked on, it was more typical to bring the entire scope from beginning to end to the board at one time. But what we found was that we ended up having to come back for additions anyway, and then having to explain them. And so in recent years, especially with these larger projects, we've more typically broken it into kind of phases. And so the blower generator is actually a really good example, where the first request that we came to you with was a request to approve us just to do an alternatives evaluation and decide, you know, what were the best options for the district. And then we came back and said, okay, now we've figured out what, you know, the concept is, now we want to design it. And now that we've got it designed and we have an idea of, you know, what it's actually going to cost us, now we can figure out what kind of support is going to be needed during construction. And, you know, I don't know what you think, John, but I feel like it has really cut down on the number of times that we have to keep coming back with our handout for more money.
I guess what I'm getting at is more of having kind of a heads up that like this kind of additional cost associated with that work is kind of at least mentioned or brought forward when we approve like the contract.
Oh, the initial, this is
Yeah.
phase one, and we expect to see another, like, in this case, we're
You
talking
might not have
about.
numbers, but just knowing that, like,
Yeah.
there's some additional add-ons that are likely to come.
Right, so the 258,000, that accounts for about 5% of the overall construction cost, just knowing that that's coming down the line.
You don't have to be totally tight, but it'd be good to know.
Yeah.
So.
And probably the range that's too low. I mean, we've
Yeah.
estimated at 10+% normally, so
Yeah,
this
exactly.
just helps us kind of refine the
Mhm.
numbers down the road. But
For sure.
yeah, give you a heads up at the front end.
Mhm.
Sounds good.
Anybody else? Dave?
All right.
Nothing here.
Oh, go ahead. Did you say nothing?
It takes me a minute to get to the mute button. I was just saying, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, with that, I'll read the requested board action. I'm asking the board approve the proposal from Corollo Engineers Incorporated for engineering services during construction for the aeration blower system efficiency, power, and secondary clarifiers 1 and 2 rehabilitation project in an amount not to exceed $258,758, and authorize the general manager to execute task order number 23 to the master services agreement with Corollo Engineers.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Director Peterson, how would you like to vote on this item?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right. I move approval of payment of claims in the amount of $1,479,725.34.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Director Peterson, how would you like to vote on this item?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is it taken for you guys? Now, there we go.
That motion passes unanimously.
Okay. That brings us to standing and ad hoc committee and liaison reports. Does anybody have anything?
I do not.
No, the efficiency, meeting was canceled this week, so nothing to report.
Okay. Dave, you good?
I don't have any reports, and I'll just give the El Dorado County Water Agency report. We don't have one there either. The meeting is next week.
Okay.
For board member reports, I'll just go ahead and real quick. I just want to tell folks that, you know, at the last board meeting, I asked that the budget items be pulled from the consent calendar, and I did not this time. I went through the budgets pretty thoroughly, and that were provided to us in the workshop, and I really appreciated staff's work on that. They were very thorough, very consistent and very detailed. And I was completely satisfied and informed with them. And so I did not ask that that item be pulled for discussion this time. So I really felt with no rate increase involved that it was non-controversial and not something that needed further discussion. So anyway, thank you, staff, for putting those budgets together and doing such a good job on that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. And does anyone else have a board member report?
I was just gonna say, I was able to sit on this working group call I was invited to about biomass. And so really nothing to report except for just to opine that in some way I'd love to see biomass here anywhere in the basin as I keep watching trucks of dead lumber be trucked away and fires be burned away. The idea we're not using that for some greater purpose and can't kind of connect those dots just seems terribly unfortunate to me. So again, kind of just voicing that frustration after I was on that call into the ethos.
Was STR on that meeting?
They were not.
Should be. We can write a lot.
Yeah. Well, the college is an interested partner, and there's some other folks, but it's just a challenging, it's just a challenging thing to kind of, from a regulatory perspective, from an economic perspective, but, there just seems to be a linkage that somehow we should be able to connect. You're literally burning the stuff for free. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just seems like there's an interesting opportunity. So just kind of throwing it out there.
Thank you. John, you're up.
Okay, I've got a few updates today. Mostly the usual, starting with staffing. Underground repair water, our supervisor, Doug Van Gordon. You know Doug, he's been here for 29 years, but his last day is actually today. So Doug's on his way to Florida. Wish him the best, and his family, a lot of families going with him. So he's looking forward to that. Following an in-house recruitment last month, we selected Richard Jones. You might know him as Ivy. He was promoted to that supervisor position, and Ivy was the lead for many years, and so we are now starting an in-house recruitment for his previous position, and this will then result in a new opening in underground repair sewer, which I think will undergo a full recruitment and advertising process probably in the next 6 to 8 weeks. We'll see how it goes. And then we recently completed a full recruitment for an opening in underground repair water, and Herbert Aguirre was selected, and he'll start on June 14th. He's a local, and he has about 20 years experience as a plumber in the area, so we're really looking forward to him joining us. And finally, we will be at full strength in underground repair water after more than a year. So on to COVID. Continued positive news, really, statewide and locally at the district. I sent the board some information yesterday from our Barton call, which was on Tuesday. So all good there. No COVID sickness at the district. We have 3 employees out right now with COVID symptoms, which is really just normal cold and flu symptoms. But of course, they would probably be out sick anyway. But we're having them tested for COVID, and we're actually seeing a very quick turnaround on those tests. You can get right in and get a COVID test and get results back within a couple days. So that's good news. Looking ahead for the governor's direction, the color tiers, purple tier, all that will be going away on June 15th, along with some other restrictions. And at the district, really, we're waiting more for changes and updated guidance from OSHA in regards to wearing masks and other COVID-related regulations. Essentially, as a workplace, the district will continue to follow OSHA regulations in this area. And I talked about this in more detail last time. If you recall, we're seeking direct COVID relief funding through the state. These are the federal funds being distributed as part of the American Rescue Plan Act. So come June 15th, when the state budget is finalized, we'll know at that time if funding will come directly to special districts from the state, or whether we will need to reach out to the city and county for some funding considerations. And again, we're looking at about $485,000 as reimbursement for our direct costs associated with COVID. Most of this was for our relief program, that 50% sewer rate relief program that was in place for 3 quarters. Any thoughts before we move on to Tahoe Keys Water?
I was just going to say, kind of, is an interesting, as we get kind of the other side of the COVID world, just a great job to you, John, and to all the staff. I mean, as I was sitting here talking and thinking of the time vortex we sat over from March of, the year before to today.
Right.
It's been crazy, talking to Randy from there, like I was a voice from God, was a crazy experience. Not enjoyable, although I got to pet my dog at that moment, so it was great. But no, staff did an excellent job. It was a crazy world. You readjusted, how people were operating in and out of the office, how you're keeping things moving forward, and it was done seamlessly, and people were kept health and safety for everybody. And, kudos to everybody that was involved, because that was a real team effort, and, really just excited to be on the other side, and really enjoying going out into the world again. So this has been excellent.
Finally, yeah.
I think we can all agree. We can also agree with the kudos and agree with the, it's nice to be out.
Yeah, it feels like we're almost out of the woods. That reminded me of something in regards to our virtual meetings. Melanie, is this something we want to bring up now, or you want to discuss with Kelly?
Yeah, no, we can bring it up now.
Okay.
Well, we're kind of looking at, I know we talked about going back to regular meetings and having staff and the community participate in person again. So one of the things we wanted to look at is, do we want to continue to offer the remote call-in and webinar feature? And part of the reason this is coming up is because the governor is looking at kind of giving an extension for his executive order. He's going to revoke that at some point, saying, hey, we have to go back to the way we used to do things. We will now be in violation of the Brown Act if people don't come in person. They can't be calling and not posting agendas from wherever their location is. But it also came up because our contract with GoToWebinar, which is kind of how we're videoing all this and bringing the community in, is up for renewal, and it costs about $6,000 a year to renew it. So if it's not something that we think is really valuable going forward until this executive order runs out, we kind of need to make that decision probably in the next couple weeks so that we know if we want to continue that or not. We can still do the call-in so people can be heard up above, but we wouldn't have the webinar piece of it where they can look and see and watch the board interact that way. It does require some extra time and effort on IT's behalf. It requires setting up a special meeting for that. There are some kind of details to it that is a little more hands-on than just setting up a meeting. So it's something to think about and consider. One of the other things we're doing, Gary and I were talking about it earlier, and he was saying, well, how many guests have attended virtually over the course of this? So I'm kind of having Marla tally up some of that information to see, did we have 6, did we have 8, did we have 10? How many people have benefited besides staff? I mean, true guests to the meeting to see if it's worthwhile. So it's really...
One of the things I'd be curious at looking at as well is, from a staff perspective, and this just feels from my own world, is going to and from meetings was like hours of wasted time. I gained 3 hours every day that I used to not have. I'm so much more productive. And so really, from a staff perspective, nothing else, because if I'm needing to get a report from, say, Julie, and you're somewhere else or whomever, efficiency, there's a lot to be gained from that access point. And so I think that's an interesting cost variable as well, to provide this greater flexibility. I'm just an advocate for great flexibility, for Chris's situation, wherever Dave's at today. And even kind of extending past that, there could be a reality where Chris is, flying somewhere and, posting his thing and setting that up. So again, I'm open to greater flexibility for both staff and board.
Did you use the webinar feature, or did you just call?
So when it first began, I don't remember how it started.
I know, huh?
But it did start with the webinar. So whatever that first, I don't know if it was the first feature, and then the webinar. And I also think from just a kind of a community perspective, one of the things that's interesting with the webinar, and again, this is someone that has to speak at a lot of local governance type meetings, is that the way things were agendized were fully done to dissuade people from the community with actually interacting with any elected official. Because if you ask someone that wants to comment on a meeting, say city council in particular, oh, it's agenda item 4, you got to be there 3 hours early, 3 hours late. And so for lots of reasons, I think it's an important community tool in addition to both the benefits to staff and board.
You guys have any thoughts?
I guess I agree. I like the flexibility. I guess the cost to me seems a little excessive considering the amount of public participation you have. And I'm wondering if there's a lower cost option that we might be able to explore.
Yeah, there certainly is. The other kind of format, I guess, that we use is called Nico Lab, and it's just the call-in version. So like Dave Peterson is using the call-in portion today without the video, but he's using it through the webinar, I believe, because that's the number we sent out. So if we did just the Nico Lab portion, I don't believe there's any additional cost. So it's really just the video piece while the meeting's going on. Keep in mind the video is up on the website within 24 hours because we are taping this. It's just community members can't interact while they're watching that video. So it's kind of like after the fact, they can participate in the meeting while it's happening, they just can't see what's happening. They can hear it. So it's just a little bit different. And
that's the system that we have used from the beginning of COVID for all of our internal staff meetings.
Well, I mean, to some degree, as, again, someone that's participated in meetings and then as a board member, to save the money, do I need the video? I don't. I mean, it's a great feature, but for $6,000, you know what I'm saying? Like, I could be dissuaded from that. If we could keep the openness without the cost.
One other thought, we've actually been using the GoToWebinar platform for our mandatory pre-bid meetings for the contractors. Now, going forward, I don't know how often we would want to allow remote participation, but I will tell you, we've had more contractors attend our mandatory pre-bids having a virtual option available than we've ever had before. And the reason why we use and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but the reason why we use the GoToWebinar platform for that is that it actually tells us when the individual logs in and logs out of the meeting. So we know if they're actually in attendance and can make a determination about whether, okay, were you there or were you not?
Yeah, that's right.
That's right, yeah. Okay.
It's gotta be hard to be a kid nowadays.
I don't know how to believe it.
But no, I think that's an interesting thing, and it's also, I think a good point you brought up, it's an inclusionary benefit. It's, again, the things from my small company I started, I've been able to participate in and grow because I didn't have to drive 3 hours to get there and back in that particular day, allowed for greater participation and opportunity, like to your point, because of that flexibility. So, I mean, flexibility reigns supreme. If there's a way to do it, save the money, that's great. If not, and you use it for other tools, I'm open to that as well.
And from what I understand from IT, and Brian can probably answer this question, it's a 1-year contract if we do this for the $6,000. Now, the governor may say, you have 60 days, and then that option is no longer available. We just don't know. I mean, chances are it could go further than that. It could continue. We don't have really, there was a letter today that the governor put out saying, yes, he will be doing some kind of extension just to kind of phase back in and allow people to transition back to the regular schedule and the regular way of holding the meetings. But we have no idea what that looks like or what that commitment is at this point.
There's different components to that, though. Because what Julie was saying is that it really helps her with her pre-bid meetings. Now, that's a whole different function than what you're asking us. For us personally, call-in was fine for me. Just, yeah. I don't need to see anybody because that's fine.
And I agree with that. and we don't need to see you either.
You're right. We don't want to get on my but if it has a value to engineering for that purpose, then that's a different thing.
But I think what you're saying is do it, but let engineering pay for it, right?
Yeah.
Well, is there any way we can? Save a lot of money no matter where you get it from. Can we put that on our COVID relief funding request?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Well, I mean, yeah, and this, the contract comes up, I think we need to renew by June 20th. We have a little bit of time, we can do a little more research and bring it back to the next board meeting for a decision.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Does that sound good to everybody?
I really like the capability. I'm not using the video today,
I'm parked under a tree in Ennis, Montana, and just don't get great cell service here. But I think, especially for the public, it is really convenient to be able to, it's a difference between attending and not attending, having that video capability. And for $6,000, I think that's a real small bump in our $40 million budget. So I would support, continuing on with it. I think this is a great, probably the only good thing to come out of the pandemic is this new protocol for meetings.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of capabilities that you could explore just internally. Meetings with staff can happen differently in face-to-face, like instantly.
Well, I know with the El Dorado Water Agency, sometimes John and I would spend more time in the car than we spent in the meeting.
Right.
The meeting would be 45 minutes, and we'd be in the car for 2 hours and 15.
Well, I literally raised at a TRPA governing board meeting that they said, this is a meeting about getting people to drive less, and you made me drive here to say that. Like, it was kind of a ridiculous paradigm we existed in, right? And so it starts to get out of that as well.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we're only talking here about the GoTo webinar, right? That the GoTo meeting and the Zoom platforms, we're going to keep those licenses?
That's in discussion as well. The GoTo logging in is a huge platform. The webinar, the meeting, and the call services. Some of the functionality we're using. Whether we keep all of the different, we've got 4 different platforms right now that we're paying for. One's part of our phone system. The other 3 are stuff that we're paying for. We're also rolling out Teams coming up, which is part of our office suite upgrade. So really, we need to sort of figure out what use we want to make of this and determine who we need all 5 different platforms for meetings.
Because I think when you start utilizing Teams, your need for Zoom is reduced.
Right.
That's why I got the G Suite as an option for my thing, because I like the video conferencing without a separate kind of portal. And so I think, you could start to reduce there. But to go to webinar seems to be kind of a separate reality from there.
Yeah, I think the use cases we found for the webinar worked really well for these pre-bid meetings where we required attendance because we can record, have a record of that. And it worked out well for the board meetings because the way that the video showed up, where those meeting, we saw everybody on the screen, and we wanted them to just the board members and board room. This is one reason to look at the webinar package. But if we're going to be opening it to the public, okay, that's not needed as much as I don't know about community or previous stuff.
I think it's something we should talk about because, I feel like there's so few opportunities for us to have learned something from COVID. We should take advantage of them when we can. So, rather than just going back to the way we used to do things and making everybody physically show up here, and that way then limiting our bidder pool, maybe there is a place for a certain project. Some of them, you want them on the ground because you want them walking through that facility to see it before they put price to it. But others,
And where does,
projects,
And you gotta look at things like, even putting together my contracts now, how much time do I put in a thing for me to drive from A to B 6 times? And then to get a hotel room 3 times? And then to do this 4 times, right? It's tens of twenties of thirties of thousands of dollars over a 3-year project, multiplied by 4 people. You save yourself $200,000 just looking at it slightly differently. There's a lot of different options.
I think there's cost reductions by eliminating some redundancies we've got in place now to handle the COVID situation. We can parse it down to a couple of the packages, not all of them we have right now.
Good.
Might have some savings as well.
Because it sounds like maybe we'll revisit this in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
If you guys think about it.
Yeah. Julie made some great points, so definitely worth looking at.
Okay.
I've got one more item here on Tahoe Keys Water. I guess before I start that, I don't think we have any staff or attorney reports today. Okay, seeing none, I'll go to Tahoe Keys Water next.
And Dave, I guess
John,
you'll sign off.
I need to sign off. As I've said before, I've got a conflict of interest with Tahoe Keys Water and also with the 2 items on closed session. So I'm going to recuse myself from those, and that is the remaining business of the district. So with that, I will say goodbye to you all.
Bye, Dave.
You know,
Okay, Tahoe Keys Water. We're continuing to work with Tahoe Keys and Lukens as a community partner. So I guess I'll go into a little more detail at the Tahoe Keys. Their well number 3 remains in compliance with uranium standards, and this well has not been shut down by the state and can be used at least for another quarter, at which time another round of tests will be taken and compliance assessed by the state. So with uranium, compliance is based on the average of 4 quarterly tests. So right now, the average of 4 quarters, it's at or below the standard. And I'm actually not sure how they're operating well number 3, or if this may impact their current restrictions on landscape irrigation or not. The next board meeting, I think they'll address this, is on June 16th. That's the full Tahoe Keys board meeting. And same with the Keys, well number 1, that remains in service, and they've been using it a lot more, of course, because well number 2's been off, and they run well number 3 last. But you know, we're concerned about rising PCE levels in well number 1 as well. So keeping our eye on that. Well number 2 is still offline due to uranium, but treatment systems are being installed on wells 2 and 3, and we're told they're going to be in place, you know, in the next 4 weeks. The Keys will also be installing a backflow assembly at our intertie location sometime this month, and so our intertie will be available by July 1st, I would guess. It's available on an emergency basis right now, but we'd like them to install that backflow assembly for long-term operation. And we see this would supply about 500 gallons per minute during non-peak periods. And we've already installed a pressure sustaining valve at that location to protect and keep pressure on our side of that intertie. So I want to talk a little bit more about Lukens. They continue to operate that fill station. Currently, Jan has 7 contractors signed up using a total of 110,000 gallons during the month of May. That represents about 200 separate trips during that month. I think those tanks are about 500 gallons on average. So Lukens continues to track volume, location, where the water's going, and when it's being used, and really enforcing all other elements of their water conservation program. And our intertie with Lukens has not been utilized at all this month for any supplemental water needs. Lukens is also in the final permitting stage with the Department of Drinking Water for their new treatment system at well number 5. And they were actually out here yesterday doing their final inspections. We think that's going to go online in about 2 weeks. So that's another 650 gallons per minute. And on Tuesday, just this past Tuesday, Haynes started construction on the Lukens Keys intertie. So that'll take probably a couple of weeks to get completed. So a lot of new water coming online from Lukens to the Keys. And as I mentioned last time, the Keys has requested that the district take a detailed look into water supply alternatives from the district. And this includes a wholesale water agreement and alternatives, a number of alternatives up to and including a complete asset acquisition and integration into the district system. And we need to consider the cost, process, and district improvements that would be required for each one of these alternatives. And I'll be looking for some board direction on this next time at our next board meeting, June 17th. We'll have some discussion for direction for future district action on these water supply alternatives. And I'll have an action item coming forward, and that should include a reimbursement agreement with the Tahoe Keys, so they'll be paying the cost of this evaluation. And I've been working with Gary on this. This includes reimbursements for legal and engineering professional services. So that's all coming up on June 17th. That's all I have for the Keys. If there's any questions.
Curious about this potential for acquisition and that Is Lucan a potential option for the keys to kind of move to that front? Or is it really, they're looking to?
It's potential. I don't know if they've asked them specifically. I don't know. I know that there could potentially be some kind of, partnership between the Keys and Lucans. There's some pros and cons for them as well. Lucans is a disadvantaged community, so I think if they consolidated with the Keys, it could kind of be problematic in terms of future grant opportunities. But there's probably private companies out there that would be interested in Tahoe Keys, California Water, Golden State Water. I've heard about that potential interest, so I don't know in detail. It's a potential, but they've asked us specifically for a detailed evaluation.
What is the cost of one of their treatment systems that they've recently installed? What does one of those run?
Oh,
I don't have any frame of reference.
I think we're looking at over $1 million in capital costs for those systems. I've heard some numbers floating around for the last couple months.
Yeah, I feel like that's our expectations, that some of the numbers we're hearing is less than that.
Yeah, I don't exactly.
It's a significant figure.
Yeah.
Especially when you take, what's the population of the customer base of the Keys, you divide that by 1 million, that's, a relatively sizable portion for the system.
Yeah, there's about 1,529 customers in the Keys connections. So that is a big, huge investment.
That's a huge, for
right.
Well, yeah.
And
I'll leave all the economics alone for a minute. They're just challenging. They're impossible actually for the Keys. Like if you could run into the future, their liabilities meet what they're forecasted in the future PCE. It's a system that's collapsing, and we're just watching in slow reality. And so, I think what we're doing is incredibly wise as to how we manage this both from a district perspective going forward. And kind of what I would say on some degrees is like an eventuality. Like those figures are hard to bear now if you run that by that 1,500 people times $1 million, and that's not even touching what they really have to do.
yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on the economics of each one of these alternatives and just making sure that our customers aren't paying more because of this, any kind of agreement or consolidation, asset acquisition, water supply agreement with the Keys. Our customers are not paying that bill in any way. Gary, anything you want to add, and perhaps in regards to that legal memo you've been working on?
Yeah, we've been working with district staff on what steps and things would need to be done on the two options they've asked the district to look at it, a water supply agreement or an acquisition. And so we're including both regulatory and due diligence and engineering requirements and stuff that would have to do in each of those scenarios. And we're getting close to having that finalized, and just waiting for a few more comments to come in from district staff. And then, did you want us to present that at the next board meeting to talk?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If I could perhaps push that out early, just so the board has a chance to review it, and then bring that forward at the next board meeting as part of this whole discussion, reimbursement agreement.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, so they have a chance to read it. It's not
an easy read.
It's not that long. I think it's 4 or 5 pages. So it's trying to organize it, not in super detail, but enough to give the board and Tahoe Keys that asked for this an idea of what the terrain looks like going forward in each of the 2 scenarios.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll finalize that in the next few business days. I'll push that to the board, maybe add a map or 2, and we'll discuss it on the 17th.
Yeah.
That it for you?
All good.
Okay, I'm gonna go into closed session. With nothing to report. I believe this meeting is adjourned.